It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Gregg Wassmansdorf, and he is the Senior Managing Director of Newmark Grubb Knight Frank's Global Corporate Services Division. Gregg is an expert in real estate portfolio optimization, business location strategy, facility site selection, and economic incentives. Gregg is also a member of an exclusive Site Selectors Guild, which is an association of the world's foremost professional site selection consultants. And our organization, Economic Development Winnipeg, and our business sales team, Yes Winnipeg, have tapped into the Guild as well as other site selectors. They're very important in terms of being able for our community and our region to raise the level of awareness of some of the opportunities and the competitive advantage that we have that those site selector consultants might be able to take to their clients and pitch the opportunities for them to make future investments. So ladies and gentlemen, could you please welcome Gregg Wassmansdorf.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I've been given a flexible time slot, I'm told. So while I've got a wide variety of slides prepared and some stories to share, while I'm presenting, if you have questions, please put up your hand and engage. I'm happy to have a discussion as we're moving along here. And if it's not inappropriate, please indulge me for a moment, because in some of these economic development meetings, I do like to start with this prayer. You're probably familiar with it, called the Serenity Prayer, right? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. But if you're familiar with it, certain things you must accept. Have the courage to change certain things that you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I bring this up because there's also an economic developer's serenity prayer. Some of you might be familiar with that one too. It starts very much the same. Grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change and the courage to change the things that I can. But the difference is the last line. Give me the economic incentives to cover the difference. Well, I'll start maybe by telling you why I'm here. And it's because I'm a site selector. I help companies make decisions about where in the world to put their facilities. And why that's important to you is really this. I've got 3 jobs as it pertains to you. My first job is to find you. My second job is to eliminate you. My third job is to optimize what you have to offer for my clients. And I can't emphasize that enough, especially the second point. After I find you, my job is to eliminate you. My job is to disqualify you from consideration. Because when my client says, we'd like to make an investment in the United States, or maybe Canada, how do I get you on that client's radar screen if they haven't even begun to think seriously about the Canadian marketplace? And even if they are, maybe it's a market entry strategy, they are 100% convinced that they need to be in Canada with a new research and development center, with a new manufacturing site, with a shared services center that's going to support them globally. They decide Canada's where we want to be. We've done our site selection by magazine article. We know all about the stable banking system. We've heard that there's a lower corporate tax rate in Canada than in the United States. We know that there's smart people in Canada. Seems a little cold, but it's still kind of European, so we'll go with it. But still, in the Canadian context, how do I find you for that client opportunity when the client's predisposition is to go to Toronto? Or maybe their second facility in Canada After Toronto, well, naturally, that would be Montreal, because that's the second largest metro, because that's how they penetrate the Quebec market. Or if they're not so much interested in the Quebec market, well, then clearly it's going to be Calgary, because that's the second largest headquarters center in the country. So Toronto first, Calgary second, third would be, I don't know. Where do they go next? So getting on my radar screen, getting on the client's preliminary list of options is a challenge. Now, I'll admit something. I've not been in Winnipeg in 18 years. I've been doing corporate site selection for 17 years. The projects I'm working on right now, or have worked on in the last 2 years, include a $1 billion data center project. I'm working right now with an Italian firm that's entering the North American market with a $100 million manufacturing plant. I've worked on call centers, shared services. I helped an Asian firm last year with a North American feasibility analysis for a $15 billion semiconductor fab site. Sometimes Canada's on the list, sometimes it's not. About 80 to 85% of what I do is in the United States. I'm a dual citizen, I go back and forth very easily. But my point is, I've looked at Winnipeg and at Manitoba for various projects. Have never gotten past the desktop analysis and the preliminary or the secondary screening to then come here with a client to do a site tour. So that's just me. I know you have site selectors come here all the time, and they bring their clients with them to look at the market, but that's me. That's my experience. So again, coming back to that notion that first I need to find you. Of course, I know where you are, but what I mean by find you is what you have to offer has to resonate with me so that I can convey that to my client in both data and in words and in pictures and charts and everything else, and be able to convince them that you have what they need. You have the capability and you have the capacity to support what they want to do and be globally competitive. So that's what I wanted to start with. So I'm a geographer by education, and I regularly get into debates with people about whether geography is dead or not dead. What do I mean by that? So, The World is Flat. How many have read that book? Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat. He basically said, with geopolitical changes and the rise of the internet in particular, you can grow a $1 billion business from your basement. And we've heard stories like this. 3, 5, 10 people get together, they start building a business, it goes global because of the internet, and all of a sudden the thing explodes. And 10 young people issue an IPO and all become multi-millionaires or billionaires. That's part of the flattening effect that Friedman talks about. And in effect, he says, you can innovate and grow a business without any need to emigrate, to physically move. And he published that in 2005, which seems like ancient history now. But at the same time, 2005, Richard Florida, who many of you are probably familiar with, published a series of articles and said the world is not flat, entirely opposite. The world is very, very spiky. Because what keeps happening is that cities and towns lose employers, lose labor, and those opportunities and those investments and those people keep congregating and clustering in fewer and fewer places. More than ever, we've got winners and losers that are expressed spatially. Friedman, you're on crack. It's not flat. It's incredibly uneven, in some cases unfair, right? But both the benefits and costs of locating a business are highly unpredictable from place to place. And this term glocalization arose because, in a sense, they're both right. Because we can pick plenty of examples of both, right? And that the world is, in fact, both hypermobile in terms of both people and capital and investment. And we're definitely living in a global economy, but the strength of the local, especially metropolitan areas, is more vital than ever. And I was talking with Jeremy yesterday about, in the United States, the Brookings Institution. If you're not familiar with Brookings, look them up on the internet. They are publishing more good quality research on metropolitan areas and regional economics than anybody right now. Check them out. So what are the triggers for new investment? And my talk basically is in two pieces, by the way. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about corporate site selection, the drivers of site selection, what companies are looking for today. Some of this may seem like, site selection or economic development 101, but we've got a wide range of people with experience in the room. We've got expert practitioners in economic development. We've got elected officials. We've got new people to the industry. So I'll try to hit my comments across all of the sort of experiential levels, if that's okay. But after talking about site selection for a while, then I want to pivot toward a discussion about economic development and what I perceive and what people in my practice perceive as being some of the best practices, especially around regional economic development. Again, coming back to this idea that I need to find you, and then after we've found you, you need to stay on the list by putting your best assets forward. So we'll come to that in a little while. So when we think about how companies change, right, how their physical footprint changes globally, there are a number of triggers. Change events, you might call it. And sometimes it's growth and the need to access a new market. So they'll say, look, we're already in 5 countries in Asia. It's time for the 6th. We're already in Brazil and Chile and Argentina. Now it's time for Colombia. Or we're a European company. We need to be in North America. We can't just sell into North America anymore. We need to be there. We need to enter that new market physically with sales, production, distribution, or what have you. So new market entry is a big driver, of course. Inefficiency, of course, we deal with that all the time in our world of corporate real estate. Our clients sometimes have 5 facilities. They sometimes have 500 facilities worldwide. They grow through acquisition. They grow through business units setting up new facilities, right? Because the P&L, right, the profit center is decentralized down to that business unit, and they just grow the way that they feel that they should grow. And over time, corporate stands back and says, holy cow, we've got 168 facilities worldwide, and this is a mess. We can't manage this. We can't control this. Our profit centers are running amok. We need to consolidate. We need to relocate. We need to close that facility in Canada. We need to close that facility in the United States. We're going to consolidate them. We're putting them in Mexico because that's going to be a more efficient strategy for us. It might be related to rising costs. I'm so glad that Manitoba Hydro is here today because I'm going to be talking about energy costs. I live in Ontario. It's a really, really big problem. You're blessed here with lower energy costs. Rising costs could be labor, could be taxes, could be transportation. You know the cost factors. And of course, every business and every industry is different. So with each client that we're working with, the cost factors are different. And you talk a lot about transportation in this room. When you speak to your clients, when you speak to your businesses locally, you need to be talking to them about who's paying for the transportation costs, inbound versus outbound. Customers are not always paying both sides of the freight. Anyway, changing business climate can mean so many things. It could be regulatory issues that change around building permits, air permits, labor law. We've seen 3 highly unionized and historically pro-union states in the United States, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana, all become right-to-work states in the last 24 months. Think about that. Right-to-work, anti-union in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana. Indiana's got more manufacturing per capita than 45 other US states, and they've gone right to work. And in Canada, I think we're kind of ignoring, in some cases, what's happening south of the border and how that changes the business climate, how that changes the regulatory landscape. Labor's just one factor, of course. And we've already heard today from Ruth in her talk about cluster initiatives, both as a policy strategy, but also what companies are doing on their own as they cluster near one another. And that's always an interesting dynamic, because some companies will say categorically, I will not be in that location because my competitor is there. It's too risky. I don't want to compete for talent. I don't want to, I don't want my people to be poached. I want to be the employer of choice. But we see as many and maybe more companies who say, where are my competitors? Because maybe I want to be there. Where is my competitor and the rest of their supply chain? Because I need to tie into that. That will be efficient for me. I need their transportation networks. I need the finance people who understand this business. I want to be near them. When industry people come to town and meet with people in my industry, I want to be there. I want academia to be there supporting me. I want government to not be looking at me sideways because of what I do, because there are 15 other companies that do what I do, and government gets it. They see us as an asset. They speak our language in government, right? And that's one of the benefits of clustering, among other things. So these are all drivers. And every time we kick off a new project with a client and we go through our needs assessment, we review all of these factors. Where are your pain points across your organization? What are the major trends in your industry that you're trying to respond to? What are you trying to accomplish with this particular business unit or this facility? Are you just trying to add new capacity? Or as Jeremy and I were talking yesterday, we love this word, are you trying to transform something within your business or within your industry and do something that no one's ever done before? We ask these questions, and we have fantastic conversations with our clients about this, and it changes the geographic scope of what we do. Because often, what they think they want initially isn't what they really need. I helped a Canadian steel manufacturer a few years ago. This is one of my favorite stories. And they said, we need to expand our footprint in the United States. We're going to go to the traditional steel areas. We're a steel company. We have experience in Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. We're running trucks every day through that corridor. We can create efficient lanes. We know those markets. Just find us a building. Of course, this happens a lot. I'm in a real estate company. Just find us a building. And here are the markets we're interested in. Well, my job is to say, I don't believe you. And let's talk a little bit more about what you're trying to accomplish with this business, with this investment. Because you want to own, not lease. So that tells me you want to make a longer-term commitment, not a shorter-term commitment. What are you truly trying to accomplish? So I'll make a very long story short. We didn't put the facility in Illinois, Michigan, or Ohio. And they didn't continue to run steel coils and finished steel fabbed products by truck. After 9 months of effort, we put them in northern Mississippi in a trimodal park where they started taking steel coils in by river barge and sending finished products out by both truck and rail. They lowered their sort of non-variable sort of operating costs by over 20%, and they transformed their business. And 2 years after the initial investment of $18 million, they re-upped, spent another almost $10 million, and expanded. So sorry, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio. You continued to lose a major industry of yours, being steel, because the center of gravity for that industry continued to move south. We were really trying to satisfy and really understand the location drivers. Here's another example, away from industrial. This is Nike. Nike, I'll bet you everyone in this room owns something by Nike. They asked us, if we're not prepared to double the size of our campus in Beaverton, Oregon, which we love. We love Oregon. We love Beaverton, right, in the Portland suburbs. It's who we are. It's a part of our culture. We are part of the fabric of the community, they of us. But if we're going to double in size over the next 10 years, maybe Beaverton's not where we should do it. So we're not going to move our existing headquarters, but if we're going to maybe duplicate our headquarters, where should it be? So again, back to the whole winner and loser idea, or the world is flat or the world is spiky. When Oregon finds out that Nike's no longer investing locally, they're just going to be steady state, and that another metropolitan area and another state is going to get basically Nike 2.0, that's shocking. So how do we do our work? We looked at 72 different location decision criteria to help Nike make this decision. So these decisions are not taken lightly. We've all heard about, the CEO who wants to be in a certain location, or the CEO who sends his daughter off to college and he wants to have his plant nearby. And there are funny stories like that, but we rarely encounter that. It's usually highly rigorous, highly competitive, decisions that are made over a lengthy period of time, 6 months to a year frequently. And as many of you are probably aware on a first-hand basis, we're often working on a code name. So you don't even know who the client is. But this is just one example. The next slide is not about people at all. It's not about 6,000 new employees. This is a data center. And I can't name who they are. I'll just call them big data. But this is a $1 billion investment. And Manitoba's really well poised for investments like this. I'm happy to say this client has Manitoba on a short list. Okay, so that's good. They're not ready to make a Canadian investment right now, but you're on the list, so that's awesome. But again, this location process began with, where can we go in Europe? Anywhere in Europe. We've seen Facebook and other firms go to Sweden and Norway, and Iceland is trying to attract data center activity, and they have. They've got 4 major data centers now in Iceland. And so we looked at 40 different countries for this, again, more than 50 variables that we were comparing for this data center site selection. And we looked at 275 sites. And we did all of that. It was kind of insane, but we did all of that in seven weeks. So I tell this story because when I talk about being investment ready, that's what I'm talking about. When we come along and say, for example, for the semiconductor project, Manitoba Hydro, if you got 500 megawatts we can use. Oh, by the way, full redundancy, we really need 1,000 megawatts. If you're not in the power industry, you have to understand that's like 3 or 4 power plants, potentially, dedicated to one project. So when we come along and we're trying to keep you on the radar screen for big projects, of course, these are mega projects. That's not what we do every day. But when we talk about being investment ready, it means knowing your community, having your data, knowing your sites, being really clear on how quickly you can get permits, whether you can or cannot get through regulatory issues at the provincial level, trying to answer as many of those questions up front as possible, because you never know when someone's going to come knocking. So let's talk quickly then about site selection factors. I'm going to pick up the pace here and roll through some of these, please. So, motherhood statement, business-friendly environment, right? Everybody says we've got a friendly workforce, we've got a productive workforce, but how do you quantify that? And how do you really prove that you've got business-friendly, supportive environment for new business? Beyond platitudes, beyond slogans, how do you prove it? What data do you have to show categorically we're better than most other places? So, reasonable and predictable regulation, prove it. Show me, what have you done for the last 10 years on corporate taxes in the province? In your municipality, what have you done for the last 10 years on municipal taxes? Show me. What have you done around permitting to make it faster, not slower? And believe me, I'm a strong environmentalist. I'm not saying cut corners. I'm not saying fill in creeks. But I'm saying be really clear about what can be developed and what can't be and how quickly it can be done. Because we don't have weeks to figure that out. So a business-friendly, supportive environment includes all of these things, especially what I call, and I've inferred this already, but what I call government at the speed of business. That's a hard thing to do, but I'm hoping with both elected officials in the room and staff in the room and staff leaders in the room, you can take this back and look at everything you do with that lens. How can we be better and faster? All of our corporate clients are looking for that. All the businesses in your communities are struggling every day to be both better and faster. How can you do the same? And getting alignment between governments, ministries, and departments. Again, can't emphasize that enough. It's very frustrating for me, my client, and for you when you have a product to sell, and the product to sell is your place, and you've told a good story, you've made it to the short list. Yes, we can do this. Yes, we can accomplish that. Yes, we have these 4 other things that you're looking for. Here's the evidence. We're ready to go when you are. But then somebody at maybe a provincial level, maybe at a utility level, comes in and says, no, you can't. You can't do that. If there's not alignment, both in policy and in procedure and in objectives, and you get partway down the path, I'd say there's almost no quicker way to get disqualified from a site selection process than when we run into a yes we can, oh no we can't situation, and we can't reconcile those. That's creating confusion, and it's creating risk. And if there's risk that something can't get resolved, if there's risk that the yes might at a later date turn into a no, we start to back away. So these are some of the things that I'm referring to when I talk about a business-friendly environment. Overall business competitiveness, again, can't emphasize that enough. Everybody and their dog is doing rankings these days. Frankly, a lot of them are awful, but they get magazine space. And please, if you're looking at a ranking, please track down the methodology and take a look through. There's so many rankings out there that if you actually look into the methodology, what appears to be a general place ranking, actually, when you look at the methodology, is really only about one industry. Or they really only looked at 7 factors. And I won't name it. I'm not even sure that I can remember the name of it, but there's one in particular I'm thinking of. It got a lot of press. It was all about best places to do business. But when you look at the methodology, really what they were focused on was venture capital, IPO, new startups of high technology firms. But it got press as a best places to do business, which was a complete misleading headline and storyline. So be careful with the rankings, but know that you're being ranked all the time, even when you don't know it. And you're getting disqualified before you even knew that you were in the race in the first place. That can be a little frustrating. Please. Everybody's concerned with workforce. Everybody. And more than cost, it's really about the sustainability and the pipeline of skill that's going to be available in a community to support what I want to do with my business. Once I've got the talent, me as the business owner, let me deal with retention and pay and benefits. Of course, I need to be competitive. But if I can't find the talent that I'm looking for, and if I don't know that on a sustainable basis, I've got people coming out of K-12, I've got people coming out of college, I've got people coming out of universities who will stay in my community and work for me, we've got a problem. So in this region, again, we can go back to some of Ruth's data about size of workforce and commuter shed and whether talent is more available in the capital region than outside the capital region and those sorts of things. But you've got to be looking at that very, very seriously, spending a lot of time and energy looking at the educational resources, the training resources, looking at whether or not you can keep talent here. I know that's an enormous challenge in the West. Maybe not right now that capital projects have been canceled in northern Alberta, but there's a lot of ebb and flow with the price of oil, right? The ebb and flow of talent as oil prices go up and down, but it's something that you've got to be spending a lot of time and energy on. And the last bullet there about creating permanent, not temporary capacity is really what it's all about. Please. So I'm highlighting here as an example, again, that continuum of educational and training opportunities. And I'm pointing at Alberta just as an example. And those institutions in particular, MacEwan's a liberal arts college, NAIT is technical training, right? 1-year, 2-year certificate, skills-based programs, and University of Alberta, an enormous institution, of course, but diverse in its program offerings, both research and education focused, graduate and undergraduate in its focus. And you've got many of those same types of institutions here, but how are you utilizing them? How are you engaging with them as community leaders and as economic developers? And how open are they to working with you to address the issues on the slide before about a continuum of training options and keeping the pipeline full of the type of skills and educated people that you need? This should be a dialogue that's not put off to once every year or once every 2 years. This should be an ongoing thing. Wow. This is your strong suit, isn't it? Among other things. And we look at this every day. Of course, on the manufacturing and distribution side of the work that we do, less so around headquarters and people-focused projects. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. What I will say is I've been following the Centerport story for years. I'm excited that finally tomorrow I'll get to go visit it and see what's going on there. And but in particular, what I want to emphasize, and I met the folks from the airport earlier, I want to really understand how the airport, how CN Rail, how Centerport, and other supporting institutions are all working together and collaborating so that you hit above your weight in this category. And again, just a comment about that, about hitting above your weight. Good isn't good enough. It just isn't. Not when Canada, still as a G7, G8 nation, is the 13th largest economy in the world, soon to be the 14th, 15th, 16th. You see where I'm going? We continue to be a smaller and smaller piece of the global economy. Canada is 3%, in fact, less than 3% of the global economy. Yet we're still a member of the G7 and the G8. We're still an important member of the UN and the OECD and everything else. We hit above our weight as a country, but there's only so long that other countries with double the population, quadruple the population, and eventually triple or 10 times the GDP will just allow Canada to take more than its fair share. We've got to earn every bit of it. And it's a battle. And I'm saying that as somebody who is a dual citizen. I'm going back and forth all the time, but our team is working on projects every day. European and Asian foreign direct investment into North America, North American FDI out of the country and out of the continent. And we see those ebbs and flows. And we can't just be Canada the good. We've got to be Canada the frickin' awesome. We really do. Just to earn our fair share anymore, we've got to be better than good. So again, part of my conversation tomorrow is about how are we hitting it out of the park around transportation infrastructure? And you've got to be asking yourselves the same thing. Not just what's good enough, but how can we be special? Please. I won't dwell on this. Costs are a major driving force with all the analytical work that we do. Especially on a global basis, hey, Canada is a safe place to do business. But again, there's only so long that we can say, well, we're safe, we're stable, we're democratic, we protect international intellectual property rights, we don't have terrorism, we get along well, we've got the rule of law. I mean, but really, those are table stakes. Those are just the chips you put down to play in the game. That doesn't win you any business. Because as we continue to see, investment continues to go to all sorts of places that don't have any of that. So clearly, that's not enough to differentiate. It's important, absolutely, but it's not enough. So what else? I mean, there are so many factors. These are just some. We've talked about clustering, talked about infrastructure, and Ruth, you mentioned it this morning. Growth continues to happen here. Is it predictable growth? Is it steady growth? How are you planning for that? How are you funding it? How much of the cost of growth are you asking citizens to pay, and are you asking business to pay? Business doesn't cast a vote, does it? People do. So we sometimes have a tendency, and this is everywhere, but we sometimes have a tendency to say, well, I don't want my residential tax base to get upset, so we'll just move those costs over onto business. And then we wonder why local business says, I'd like to grow here, but we're not going to grow here. We're going to stay. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're not leaving, but we're going to create a second facility, and that's going to be somewhere else. How many have seen that happen in your community? It happens all the time. So we can't just keep shifting cost to business and thinking, well, it's only 2%. It's only a 3% increase. Because if you do the compound math, and when people like me and my clients are doing 10-year forecasts on their business, and you take a 3% annual growth and you compound that over 10 years, guess what? You're out of the race. You're done. So, point 3, regional economic development. Time check? Great. Let's go to the next slide. A unified marketing brand for the region. So first of all, thank you, Manitoba Capital Region, for bringing me in. It's actually a tremendous honor to be here. And when I started doing research for this talk, I started with Manitoba Capital Region. And don't get me wrong, but because I've already worked with Winnipeg Economic Development, which is a great organization. That's the big dog, right? But I went to Manitoba Capital Region to find out what they do. So, okay, founded in 1999, but I thought, okay, if this is sort of the tip of the spear, if this is like the cutting edge of what the region's all about, let me go find out what that looks like. So press releases that are 10 years old, population statistics on the region website from 1996. Okay, I'm thinking that's odd. So maybe it's not the marketing arm. So I went and explored what it does. But I looked at the partner network. That was important too, because from an economic development point of view, what we see increasingly are public-private partnerships, public sector, municipalities, regions, with all their private sector partners all lined up together, pulling that cart, right, for economic development. So let's go look at the partners. Well, what I saw were 5 consulting engineering firms who've all ponied up their $1,000 to be a member here, right? But then I figured it out. As the region's really about regional planning and regional infrastructure planning, and the consulting engineering firms, they're all great firms, by the way. I recognized every name of them, and they're fantastic firms. But I realized, okay, that's not really what economic development is all about in the greater Winnipeg region. So, and I hope the phasing of the slides are going to work, but we'll see. But as I continue to explore, again, I've not been here in a long time, and I've looked at data, and I've done some site selection studies that include Winnipeg, but kind of on a macro level. But as I looked through the region website, I wasn't even sure how to begin thinking about the place, how to organize myself spatially. I'm a geographer, remember, right? And I'm about place decision making. So should I look at the district? I kind of explored that. Should I look at communities through the community partners? No, that wasn't quite right. And then there were regions and cities, and I kind of got confused, to be honest. So I then went on and said, okay, let me just explore. You must do this too. You open Google Chrome, you open up a tab, type in a search, and you see a whole bunch of interesting listings, and you start opening up new tabs. I'm going to go explore this, explore this, explore this, and that'll give me a picture of the place. Now, I'll just do the big reveal all at once. If you could go back. This is what I discovered, but in a stepwise way, right? I went to Economic Development Winnipeg, and I've had great experiences working with them, no question. I've always been a little bit confused about what the Yes Winnipeg thing was but anyway. But I know people in those organizations, and I've had good experiences with them. So no complaint there. But then I did wonder, like as in Atlanta, where the chamber is the economic development group, I wanted to go explore the chamber. And I saw, okay, it's a membership organization. It's kind of a traditional chamber. I get it. But then I saw that there are other chambers around the province. Of course there are. That makes sense. But so far, like I've got 5 websites open, and they all say they do some form of economic development, or at least they support economic development, which is great. I then stumbled upon Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce, which is so exciting because we're actually working on an economic development project right now in a US state. And as we scoped it, it was so sad because when we talked about First Nations, or in the US, Indian relations with the community, and how do we involve them in the process, the answer was, well, we don't, and they don't. So just leave them out of scope, which is really disappointing. So I was really interested to explore the Aboriginal Chamber. And then, of course, offshoots of that, again, I'm still clicking and opening Google Chrome tabs, right? And I'm finding, the Métis organization and some investment funds around First Nations and Aboriginal groups. So that was all interesting, but now my head's getting clouded because I'm not sure, again, how to keep my focus on economic development. I thought, let me go up to the provincial level, because I've also dealt with the province around economic development issues. They continue to say that they're active in economic development. I'll go explore there, which made sense. And I found some of what I was looking for. Then found Manitoba Trade and Investment on a separate website. And understandably, that's, they have a very particular role, okay, about inbound and outbound investment and supporting companies in that respect. But they also have kind of an in-province economic development role. Or if they don't have a role, they certainly have material on their website that says that they do. So I was a little bit confused by that. It was kind of duplicative. And then again, at the provincial level, I wanted to go look at our friends at Manitoba Hydro because they've got an economic development role. And I want to emphasize, that is super important. I'm working on 2 projects right now. Personally, I'm leading 2 projects right now in the US, different regions. One's about $80 million manufacturing. The other one's about $35 million manufacturing. Total employment, probably 350 jobs between the 2 of them. But Duke Energy and the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, Power, those 2 utilities are right in there, in the process, supporting our methodology, supporting our research, working with the state, working with the counties, working with the communities. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about power generation, transmission, or delivery to the site, transformers and subs and all the rest of it. They're right there as a project partner, and it's unbelievably valuable. And I don't know if Manitoba Hydro has that degree of involvement here. I hope they do, and I hope to learn that over the next couple of days. Again, staying at the provincial level, kind of now moving laterally over into education. I saw the University of Winnipeg offers a program that includes, it doesn't say economic development per se, but it seems to have kind of an economic development bent to it, a specific program. So that was encouraging. Centerport Canada and the federal government, obviously there's funding responsibilities and initiatives. Again, all under the banner of economic development. And I decided, okay, I need to now get back to the local level, okay? But you can see what's going on here. And notice, I haven't put any cities up here because cities or RMs also, to a certain degree, have economic development staff and function. I mean, there's just no room on the slide. So, again, think back to what my slide was 2 slides ago. A coherent, organized branding approach to the region doesn't exist. I'd say that is a serious challenge. And it's not just about marketing. It's about how you organize yourselves for opportunities. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Here are just a couple of examples, okay? And again, getting back to this coordination concept. At the provincial level or the state level, down to the regional level and the local communities, partners need to know their strengths, know their weaknesses, be able to forfeit some territory to somebody else That's not going to be our responsibility anymore. You can do that better than we can. We'll stay over here, you stay over there, but we're arm in arm the whole way. And we see lots of organizations who do this extremely well. And that includes not just who we call the economic developers. Think broader than that. The state of Ohio and the Columbus region was one of the areas, one of the jurisdictional areas that vied very heavily for that $15 billion semiconductor project a year ago. There is no semiconductor activity in the state of Ohio today. None. And my client wondered, why are you recommending Ohio? California, yeah. New York, yeah. Texas, yeah. The semiconductors, Virginia. Ohio? It's partly because of the collaboration and our experience working with Ohio. We were trying to show our client locations, not that are active in the industry today, but have the capability and the capacity. Those are two really important words. It's not whether you've got it today, necessarily. Sometimes it is. But the capability and the capacity to support an employer or support an entire industry. Can you pull it off and sustain it? And we felt that Ohio could, and so we put them on the short list and then did the research to verify it, and our client was blown away. The state working with the region working with their local partners, the state of Ohio mobilizing not only its own School of Business and Engineering school, but 17 other schools of engineering around the state of Ohio, and doing it within 3 weeks to come up with a written offer to our client that says, we will put money in the pot and we will transform our engineering school to provide semiconductor capabilities, and you, client, will run it. Mind-blowing. They organized that in 3 weeks. Private sector involvement there as well. So I talked about the go-to-market strategy being coordinated. The marketing piece is just one aspect of that. So easy to navigate websites that tie all the information together, that allow you to go to one place, one window, that then brings you to the organizations, the people that can get things done, that can answer questions, either providing data off the website or steering you toward people that can answer questions, real people with real emails and real phone numbers, and who have responsibility and accountability. Quebec International does a great job, please. Des Moines, Iowa. I wanted to show you a Midwestern town, small metropolitan area, relatively, right? They do a fantastic job. And by the way, I recycle some of these slides from other presentations. I'm happy to tell you. Next slide. This is part of my standard deck. I love your Winnipeg website. It does a great job. It might become an organizing principle for you as a region. No, just saying. Real estate, I have to mention real estate. I'm in a real estate organization. Being investment ready means having sites, having buildings. Doesn't mean you've got to have speculative construction just sitting out there waiting for somebody to show up. That often doesn't work, because you show up and find a 150,000 square foot building all ready to go, but guess what? The column widths are wrong, the ceiling height's wrong, right? Clear height. You can't always predict the need of business. But knowing and working in close collaboration with your real estate community, both the developers and the brokers, the people who know the sites, the people who can build stuff quickly, working on permitting. Would it surprise you to say that I was in a jurisdiction a week and a half ago, and when we said, we need to build 350,000 square feet of manufacturing, and they said, we'll give you a rough grade permit in 8 days. We'll give you your structural permit, guaranteed, less than 3 weeks. How many do that here locally? Where? Where? Headingley. Yeah? Fantastic. Government at the speed of business. Please. Social media campaigns, that's part of the marketing. It's helpful, but you've got to make sure your back-end organization is ready to support this. There are lots of crummy websites, lots of, Twitter feeds that last for about 7 weeks and then they stop. You've got to have an organization that is built to support your marketing endeavors, please. Community ambassadors are important because, in fact, next week, my team's going to be in Greenville, South Carolina, interviewing 15 employers. Greenville's been shortlisted for a project. We're now starting our interview process with local employers. What has your experience been in this state, in this community? How easy is it for you to find people? What is your pay scale? What kind of benefits do you pay? What's the turnover like? You're located near BMW. Do you lose talent to BMW? On and on and on. We've got a long questionnaire that we go through with all of our employers. Who are the employers that I could speak to in Winnipeg today or tomorrow if I asked you? I want to talk to 5 manufacturers who are ready to go, ready to tell their story. How about shared services? How about finance? In all those sectors, who are your ambassadors? And I don't want a sales pitch. I want to know how they really run their business. Who are your advocates? There are 4 pictures on this slide. And I chose them very deliberately because one is a data center, one is a refining facility, one is an aseptic processing line in a food manufacturing building, and the other is high bay warehouse. 4 very different industries. And when I come to town with a client and meet with economic development, and we tour your community, do you speak our language? Do you know my client's business? Part of the job of the staff of economic development is to be experts in their community, but experts in the industries that they are targeting. Lots of communities will put on their website, we want aerospace, we want automotive, we want high tech, we want. And so we show up and we say, tell us about latency rates around data centers. Tell us around, the talent that you're feeding into the food and beverage industry. Tell us about, questions related to the industry. They're not tricks, they're not traps. We just want to know, how does business operate here? And if you don't speak the language, that can be a challenge. So it means, I guess the lesson is, for every economic developer as an individual, never stop learning. For economic developers at an organizational level, know what your target industries are and learn about them. The companies who are here locally already, know them, know what their issues are, know how they operate. Do they operate on shifts? How do they train their people? Where do they get their people? Do they have turnover issues? What about supply chain considerations? What about cost of doing business? Any provincial regulations that are really bumming them out? Or what makes it easier to do business here? Because this company happens to have 17 other facilities and their Winnipeg location is their favorite one. Why? Do you know why? Because if business hasn't told you why things are either awesome or lousy, it's hard to do your job. So be experts as much as you can be. But there's another important message on this slide. The staff are meant to be the economic developers. The politicians are meant to be the facilitators. It often gets a little sloppy and a little messy when the politicians are trying to be both. I think this is my last slide. Best practices in regional economic development, a one-window approach as much as possible, okay? A single way for you to coordinate and manage your outbound marketing initiatives. It's really hard for Springfield or Morris or St. Paul to staff up and build a website and go to trade shows and build databases and do outreach and host clients that come into town. You're too small. And in fact, until I walked around the room looking at name tags, I didn't even know these places. I just kind of faked it. I wrote down your names. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but remember what I said at the very beginning. My first job is to find you. Guess what? I found Winnipeg, the region, the metropolitan area, and its nearby exurban rural communities, okay? That's job one. Find Canada, for some of my clients. Find the center of the country. That's sometimes hard. That's near, like, Idaho, right? No. Find Winnipeg. You've got to find Winnipeg, and you've got to win with Winnipeg. Capital W, all-inclusive, in quotes, Winnipeg. Before I can go look at your spec building in Morris, your site that's ready for development in St. Paul, the little community that can get permits done in less than 2 weeks. I got to write that one down, actually. What was that name again? Headingley. I am writing that down. Everyone else should be walking up to this guy afterward and asking, how do you do that? But honestly, I'll never find Headingley. How far away from downtown Winnipeg is Headingley? 15 minutes. So if I look at the labor shed, right, and the commuter shed of Winnipeg, are you in it? Do the business costs of Winnipeg apply to you? Generally. But same hydro provider, same labor shed, your local property taxes will be a little bit different. But honestly, I don't care about 2.1% versus 2.5% on a property tax bill when I don't even know if I'm interested in Winnipeg yet. You've got to win and fail as a region first before I ever have an opportunity to go visit a small town. If I send a request for information on a project, in fact, tell me, who should I send it to? I've got a $60 million manufacturing project in aerospace. It's going to create 130 jobs. I need close access to the airport, but I don't need to be on tarmac. I'd like to know everything about the province, the region, some of the specific infrastructure requirements of my client. I need that returned to me in the next 2 weeks. Who do I send it to? I'm genuinely asking. Does anyone have an answer? I'd probably call a couple people that I know at Economic Development Winnipeg, and then just hope that they're going to channel it effectively. But that's kind of relationship-based, and I'm also calling them because they got the coolest website, or I don't know. But I need some place to start, and I need somebody who's going to champion the response to that RFI and return to me a response that not only answers all of my questions, but also provides some supplemental data that allows me to say to my client, you have got to go see Winnipeg. one more. That's what it's all about. That's the strongest image or message I can leave you with. Don't let me disqualify you. Show me your best. Show it to me as a region. Get me here with my client, and then you can really show me what you can do. Thank you.